The winter assembly at Brynford Hall had always been a place of polished surfaces and sharpened tongues, but on this particular night its cruelty glimmered more harshly than the chandeliers. Lady Eleanor Harwood stood near the balustrade of the upper gallery, the golden light below casting a soft halo upon her, while the murmurs of guests drifted upward like cold mist. She maintained her usual posture of composed dignity, though she had long ago learned that poise did not shield a woman from pity. Her younger sister Julia spun through her third set with a baron's eldest son, drawing admiring glances from the crowd, while Eleanor's presence went largely unacknowledged except when a pair of matrons glanced her way only to whisper behind uplifted fans. Their voices, though hushed, carried clearly enough for Eleanor to discern the words, "eldest relic," a remark that brushed her cheek like a slap. She did not flinch, though the sting lingered. She descended the stairs a moment later with the intention of slipping outside to the terrace, where cool air might steady her thoughts. Before she reached the bottom, the Viscount's wife, Lady Rathbury, intercepted her with impeccable timing. The woman wore a practiced smile that did nothing to soften the glee in her eyes. She observed Eleanor as one might inspect a curious artifact. "My dear Lady Eleanor," she cooed, "how noble of you to chaperone your radiant sister. Not all duties are glamorous, yet someone must fulfill them." With that she drifted away, leaving Eleanor to gather her dignity as if it were a shawl that had been momentarily dislodged. Though humiliation burned beneath her calm exterior, she would not allow anyone the satisfaction of seeing her wounded. Eleanor slipped toward the terrace, drawing solace from the pale moon hanging above the frost-silvered hedges. Here, the coolness eased her breath and quieted the chaotic music from within. She reminded herself that she was 32, hardly decrepit, and that tending her father's estate had given her more purpose than half the ladies twirling inside could claim. Yet tonight even purpose felt like a thin shield against the ache of being unseen. Her thoughts traveled instinctively to Harwood Estate, where accounts waited to be balanced, fields inspected, letters drafted, tenants advised. Those responsibilities shaped her days with satisfying structure, but they could not fill the quiet hours that stretched between dusk and sleep. A sudden stir swept through the assembly behind her, an abrupt hush, followed by excited murmuring. Eleanor turned just in time to see the newly arrived Duke of Ashcombe stepping into the ballroom with the unassuming authority of a man accustomed to command. Tall, broad-shouldered, and known throughout England for his diplomatic successes following the wars, he carried an air of solemn reserve that intrigued even those who feared him. His presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. Dancers hesitated, conversations faltered, and a dozen ambitious mothers urged their daughters forward like well-trained recruits. Eleanor remained motionless at the edge of the corridor, observing the ripple he created. The Duke offered polite nods yet held himself as though bracing against invisible pressure, a man profoundly weary of being scrutinized. For a fleeting moment he glanced upward toward the gallery, and though Eleanor was no longer standing there, she sensed he was searching for silence rather than company. Something tightened faintly within her, a recognition that he carried his own kind of loneliness, though his took a different form from hers. He was the subject of relentless speculation, rumored to be unyielding in matters of business and incapacitated in matters of love. Still, the dignified line of his jaw and the studied calm of his movements revealed a man trained to conceal more than he revealed. After a short exchange with the host, he withdrew from the whirl of attention and moved toward the adjacent hall. Eleanor, hoping to leave without being noticed, found herself inadvertently blocking his path. The Duke paused. His blue eyes, cool yet discerning, met hers with a directness that startled her. "Lady Eleanor Harwood," he said, addressing her with a courtesy that felt unusually sincere. "I believe your family resides near the Ashcombe borderlands." She nodded, acutely aware of her heartbeat. "Yes, Your Grace. My father's estate adjoins the northeastern edge." His expression softened with something like relief. "Then perhaps you might forgive my intrusion soon, for I must call upon your father regarding those boundaries." Their exchange was brief, but Eleanor felt the faint tremor of something shifting, curiosity, perhaps, or the echo of dignity restored. He bowed with impeccable formality, thanked her for the small clarity she had provided, and returned to the ballroom before she could consider a response. The encounter was insignificant by society's measure, yet it stayed with her like a lingering warmth as she departed the assembly soon after. 2 days later, a carriage bearing the Ashcombe crest rumbled up the long drive of Harwood Estate. Eleanor stood near the drawing-room window, observing its approach with conflicted anticipation. Her father greeted the Duke with a blend of surprise and respect, ushering him into the library where maps and legal documents awaited discussion. Eleanor, summoned to assist with land records, entered shortly afterward. Their eyes met briefly, and she felt again the unspoken curiosity that had flickered between them at the assembly. The Duke's composure wavered almost imperceptibly, as though he had not expected her presence but welcomed it nonetheless. Their conversation remained formal, yet beneath each sentence Eleanor sensed a growing attentiveness in the way he regarded her suggestions. He listened without dismissing her expertise, a courtesy rarely afforded her by men of any rank. When the meeting ended, her father escorted the Duke to the edge of the estate. Eleanor stepped outside a moment later to gather her thoughts and found herself drawn toward the winter roses that lined the garden path. She traced a gloved finger along a dormant branch, contemplating the rarity of respect she had felt in the library. Behind her, she heard the muffled sound of boots on gravel. The Duke, speaking quietly to one of the footmen, asked, "Where does Lady Eleanor usually walk?" The words stilled her entirely. She stood hidden behind a hedge, her breath suspended between apprehension and an unfamiliar, fragile hope, understanding that the world she believed set in stone might be shifting beneath her feet. The days following the Duke's visit unfolded with a curious tension that neither Eleanor nor the household could entirely name. It began with a parcel delivered at mid-morning, addressed in a firm, unmistakably masculine hand. The footman presented it with a mixture of awe and speculation, for parcels bearing ducal seals were not common occurrences at Harwood Estate. Eleanor opened it beneath the quiet glow of the drawing-room window. Inside she found a rare botanical volume, its pages exquisitely illustrated with winter flora, plants that survived frost, plants that demanded resilience, plants that echoed something of her own character. A short note accompanied the book, written in a careful script. "For your continued stewardship of land far stronger than the world assumes. A." No title, no flourish, only the initial of a man who understood that offering too much would draw unnecessary attention. Eleanor closed the book with trembling fingertips, moved by the subtle boldness of the gesture yet uneasy about how her family might interpret it. As expected, her sisters reacted with uncontained curiosity. Julia, ever dramatic, declared the Duke must be hopelessly enchanted. Marianne, more cautious, warned that such a gift could stir gossip if discovered beyond the family. Their father dismissed the matter entirely, insisting that the Duke was merely showing gratitude for Eleanor's assistance in clarifying property records. But while he spoke with forced calm, Eleanor detected the flicker of concern in his eyes, the concern of a man who feared scandal might jeopardize his younger daughter's prospects. Eleanor assured him there was nothing improper in the exchange, though she felt the words crumble inwardly as she said them. 3 days later, the gossip she had feared arrived with alarming swiftness. Eleanor and the Duke had met by chance near the stables when she stepped out to survey the grounds before an approaching storm. The Duke had come seeking her father but paused when he saw her struggling to secure a loose shutter. He joined her without hesitation, fastening the latch with a strength and ease that made her blush despite the biting wind. Their conversation, though brief, held a quiet intimacy, a smile shared in the face of rain, a remark exchanged about the restlessness of winter skies. But as the gust sharpened into a sudden downpour, they sought shelter beneath the overhang of the stable roof, just long enough for a passing carriage to witness them standing close, speaking softly, the Duke's hand braced beside her on the wooden beam. By the next morning, the story had transformed into a scandalous tale whispered throughout Brynford. According to the embellished version, Eleanor had been cornered in the stables by a man attempting to secure a secret attachment, and the Duke had shown unseemly persistence. Worse still, the rumor claimed he intended to purchase Harwood lands not for negotiation but for control over Eleanor herself, as if she were property rather than a person. The distortion was so artful, so malicious, that Eleanor could scarcely comprehend the spite behind it. Invitations addressed to her sisters continued to arrive, but none bore her name. Marianne hesitated to speak of it, while Julia, torn between indignation and dread, insisted Eleanor ignore the whispers. Eleanor, with her customary reserve, carried the humiliation like a weight beneath her ribs. The Duke confronted the spreading gossip far more directly than she expected. He had overheard a cluster of aristocrats in the Brinford tea salon discussing the supposed entanglement. When one gentleman remarked that the Duke's interest in the Harwood spinster must signal a failing in his judgment, Ashcombe turned with icy precision and delivered a sentence that silenced the room. "I do not explain myself to cowards who speak with their eyes averted." The remark, though spare, cut deeply into the pride of those listening. Yet even this defense only fueled further whispers, for defiance was rarely interpreted as innocence. When he visited Harwood Estate again, Eleanor expected either explanation or apology. Instead, he entered the study with a restrained urgency that unsettled her. The fire crackled softly between them while he attempted to express what she perceived as the beginnings of a confession. Something about intention, about admiration, about a line he had not meant to cross but could not regret. His voice held a vulnerability she had never imagined from a man of such command, and she felt the moment tighten around them like a held breath. But before he could finish, Julia burst in carrying a letter sealed with a mark of the Mayfair Ladies' Committee, summoning Eleanor to London to clarify matters of considerable social concern. The interruption shattered the fragile equilibrium between them. The Duke stepped back, his jaw tightening as though he had been denied something essential. Eleanor, mortified, excused herself without meeting his eyes. For the rest of the day she moved through the house like a shadow, avoiding questions, concealing the humiliation that clawed at her chest. Her father tried to reassure her, but she understood too well that London's summons was no mere inquiry. It was an investigation into her character. Her sisters tried to comfort her, yet she saw the anxiety in their faces, the silent fear that her misfortune might cast a pall over their own reputations. That night she sat alone in her chamber, the botanical book open upon her lap, its vivid drawings of frost-resistant plants calling to her with bittersweet symbolism. She traced the delicate petals of a snowdrop, wondering if resilience meant enduring the storm or simply bending beneath it. She had just closed the book when she heard footsteps pacing outside her window. The sound was unmistakable, firm, deliberate, far too heavy to be any member of the household. She approached the window with caution and glimpsed the Duke walking the length of the garden path, his expression fiercely troubled beneath the cold glow of the moon. He paused once, staring toward the house as though searching for the courage to knock upon the door. But after a long moment of indecision, he turned away slowly. Eleanor watched him disappear into the darkness, her heart aching with a clarity she had resisted for weeks. If she left for London, she would face judgment alone, but he, too, was fighting a battle he could not name. London greeted Eleanor not with grandeur but with the stiff chill of disapproval. The Mayfair townhouse where the Ladies' Committee met was fashioned with immaculate elegance, yet beneath its refinement lay a sharpened judgment that pressed upon her the moment she stepped inside. She was shown into a drawing-room adorned with silk wallpaper and gilded mirrors, each surface reflecting her unease. A semicircle of matrons awaited her, their expressions polite yet poised for interrogation. Lady Fairborn, the eldest among them, folded her hands with ceremonial gravity. "Lady Eleanor," she began, "recent reports regarding your association with His Grace demand clarification." The pause before association lingered like an accusation. Eleanor inclined her head, every movement measured. "I have no impropriety to confess," she replied. "The Duke of Ashcombe has treated me with nothing but courtesy." The women exchanged glances that implied courtesy could be interpreted in 1,000 scandalous ways. Their questions continued, each one probing deeper, until Eleanor realized that silence, no matter how dignified, would be interpreted as guilt. She held her composure, though her pulse throbbed painfully beneath her glove. They wished her to denounce the Duke, or herself, or both. Anything that would tidy the narrative they had already begun to construct. Instead, she offered only truth, which seemed the least welcome answer in the room. When Lady Fairborn finally dismissed her, Eleanor stepped outside into the chilled London air with a trembling exhale. Her dignity had survived the encounter, though barely, and she suspected the committee's verdict would not rest solely upon her words. The city streets, bustling with carriages and chatter, felt indifferent to her suffering. She had scarcely reached the end of the block when a commotion erupted behind her. Servants whispered, doors opened, and heads turned with collective astonishment. Eleanor pivoted, her breath catching in her throat. The Duke of Ashcombe was striding toward the townhouse, unaccompanied, every step deliberate, every line of his posture shaped by purpose. He did not acknowledge the onlookers. His gaze was fixed solely upon her. Her heart pounded as he stopped before her, the faint rise of his breath visible in the cold morning light. "Lady Eleanor," he said, voice low yet resonant, "I was informed you had been summoned. I regretted it the instant I discovered you had gone alone." She tried to answer, but his presence overwhelmed her ability to form coherent speech. The Duke extended his arm, not in the discreet manner of a gentleman offering escort, but openly, before the gathering crowd. The gesture was shockingly intimate for their ranks, a signal too bold to be misinterpreted. Gasps rippled through the street. Eleanor hesitated only a heartbeat before placing her hand upon his arm, her glove trembling against his sleeve. He led her back inside the drawing-room without waiting for permission, a transgression so audacious the matrons could only stare. The Duke faced them with a calmness forged in diplomacy and war, yet his expression held a fierce protectiveness Eleanor had never seen directed at anyone. "Ladies," he began, "I will relieve you of your inquiry. Lady Eleanor has conducted herself with impeccable honor. If there has been impropriety, it lies in the cruelty of idle speculation, not in her actions." Lady Fairborn bristled. "Your Grace, our duty is to guard social order." "Then guard it more wisely," he replied, his voice unyielding. "For you risk destroying one of the few individuals in society whose integrity surpasses its folly." Eleanor felt heat rise to her eyes, though she kept them lowered. Without waiting for dismissal, he guided her from the room and into a quieter antechamber where the scent of parchment and lavender soap mingled faintly. There, in the dim lamplight, his composure wavered at last. He withdrew his arm but remained close enough for her to feel the tension radiating from him. "Eleanor," he began, his voice softer now, "you must forgive the disorder I have brought into your life." She shook her head. "You are not the cause of it. Malice thrives where truth is inconvenient." He studied her, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "Then allow me to speak truth clearly. I came to your estate seeking boundaries of land, yet found instead the boundaries of my own peace." She inhaled sharply. "Your Grace, do not call me that," he murmured. "Not here." He took a breath, as though bracing himself. "You possess a steadiness I have not known in years. Your mind, your composure, your courage, they quiet something within me I once believed beyond recovery." Eleanor's pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. She met his gaze fully, seeing not the distant diplomat, but a man stripped of armor. "I do not know what you intend by telling me this," she whispered. He stepped closer, though not so near as to breach propriety. "I intend," he said carefully, "to place my regard before you plainly, that you may accept it or refuse it without the clamor of gossip interfering." Before she could respond, the drawing-room doors opened again. Lady Fairborn appeared, her voice sharp with alarm. "Your Grace, the street is full. Word is spreading." The Duke straightened, the moment collapsing between them like a fragile bridge. "Then let it spread," he said, and escorted Eleanor outside. By the time they reached the courtyard, a small crowd had gathered, merchants, coachmen, passers-by, all murmuring with disbelief. Eleanor wanted to shrink from the attention, but the Duke released her arm only to lower himself onto one knee upon the cobblestones. A collective gasp surged through the street. His voice rang clearly. "Lady Eleanor Harwood, I ask permission to court you openly, honorably, and without disguise." For a long breath the world stilled. Eleanor, overwhelmed by the enormity of his gesture, felt every humiliation of the past months melt into something fierce and luminous. She offered her hand, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "You have my permission." Rain began to fall softly, London rain, thin and persistent. The Duke rose, and as they stood beneath the grey sky, Eleanor felt the weight of judgment lift, replaced by something profounder than admiration. She sensed that their union, if it came to be, would challenge the very order that had sought to diminish her. And for the first time, she welcomed the challenge.